Good evening, everyone. I am coming to you live, and this is a series that I have been wanting to do for a while and to attempt to bring to the forefront of discussion healing from your childhood traumas because we all um, have had a childhood if we're adults, but there are some things in some people's childhood that are so traumatizing, and they don't take the opportunity to look at their life in retrospect and heal that inner child. And healing that inner child requires honesty with yourself and honesty with those around you. Um, and just like reactions, your reactions can always be traced back to your trauma if you have not healed yet. And a lot of those traumas come up and we don't recognize the behavior. But fortunately, I have been through some things in life. And one of those things is um, healing the inner child. And if you look in the description box, a good, good friend of mine um, sent me this link because of what she was going through and how it helped her, and how you can go and rescue that inner child, pack their bags, and say, come on, let's go, and say goodbye to that trauma. Now, there are people who have, for example, been abused as a child. And unfortunately, according to the experts, sometimes those abuses, the child that was harmed will indeed carry that scar with them. But there's a lot of self blame. Well, I deserve this. I should have gotten this, that sort of thing. And that's unfortunate that that is normally the way that happens. It's like a woman also who may have been raped will indeed be so ashamed and blame herself for being raped instead of blaming the person who raped her. So we have to go back to whatever our traumas were as a child and comfort that child and heal that child within. One of those things is accountability, um, taking accountability. And what you have to do when taking accountability is to say, oh, I shouldn't have done this or I shouldn't have done that. But if you have not taken accountability for your own healing, you can't take accountability for what you do as an adult. So um, I think one of the things that I want to share with you, I'll give you a good example. Part of healing your childhood is going back and forgiving the people who mistreated you, or you feel mistreated you, or it's underlying that they mistreated you. And I'll give you a good example. When my mother decided that she was going to divorce my father, it was a very difficult time for her. It was a financial hardship for her. She had to work two jobs, and she could not provide me with the attention that I needed as a child. So, her sister, one of her sisters who lived in Texas, um, and had her daughter my age, who um, I went to stay with them for a while so that she could get on her feet, mama could get on her feet, and that sort of thing. And I remember the first time I met my cousin, and they had come to California, and She walked up to me. She was 5, I was 6, and I didn't know her, okay? I didn't know her. And she came up to me and said, Ray Ellen, I may play with you. And I said, no, you may not play with me, basically. But anyway, that's where I was sent to by my mom. And when I got in that situation, I found myself horribly and horrifically slighted. If my cousin did something and we were both wrong, um, I would get the whipping, okay? If my cousin would start a fight with me and she came and found us fighting, I would get the whipping. I was always to blame for her actions. And so that part of me, I think somehow buried deep within me, I had to go back and forgive my aunt. The exercise was difficult, but I went back and looked at her upbringing, and how she responded to me. And maybe I was a burden at that time. Maybe she didn't want me there, but it's something she felt she was required to do as a sister. And so I essentially looked at her circumstances and looked at what she had gone through in her life. And I took it upon myself to actually start forgiving her. The other part of this, fast forward to when my cousin was, you know, turned 18, my my aunt, who had done everything for her, she did so much for her. She put her up on a pedestal. She really did. And she basically walked away from my aunt after she'd had a stroke. And I was sitting right there and I didn't understand it. And when my cousin walked out the door, and this was, we were all visiting my other aunt in Northern California. When my cousin walked out the door, the person who had to comfort her was me. And she called my name and she said, Ray Ellen, Ray Ellen, and she was crying. And I went over to her and put my arms around her. I didn't understand the depth of her emotions then. Later on, as a parent myself, I would understand how that could hurt a person. So I went back and I looked at her and everything about her and, you know, understood her from her perspective and what she had been through. And I forgave her. And that part of my inner child was healed. The healing process had begun. And that part of it is not something that is easily done. But that's an exercise. And that link in the video is something that will help you go through that exercise because they go through it for you step by step by step. Another thing that you have to look at is how you may have been raised. Maybe you didn't like some of the things parents said to you or did to you or reacted to you or didn't do. And you have to go back and look at your parents, look at their circumstances and say, oh, and say, hey, you know what? First of all, this is the person through whom the vessel that was chosen to bring you to life. And you have to, at some point, say, okay, this is the person that was the vessel that brought me to life. And I was like, okay, so that, was something that I should be grateful for to that person. But I should also look at, you know what? She did the best she could do that she knew to do at the time. Things that she didn't know to do, she did the best she could do at the time. And this is something that I did not think about until I started going back, looking back, and trying to heal that inner child. And so the things that I went through, I'll give you another example. We used to get, I don't know about other people. Hello, Johnny Mac. I don't know about other people, but I do know that we used to get whippings when we were children, okay? And it wasn't against the law. My first whipping I remembered, and I was 5 years old, and I still don't remember what I did to this day. What did I do as a little child to get beaten by my uncle with a razor strap? That's pretty harsh. And I still don't remember what I did. And so that's something that we had to go through, the whippings. And there was no call if your parent whips you or whatever. We had to take it. And I later learned when I got older and heard some of the stories, my grandmother didn't play with nobody. She hit my uncle in the head, one of them old-fashioned, old-timey irons that didn't have a plug. She hit him in the head with it. And so this was how they did it back then. I do think that's a part of the slavery, where we were always, as those of us who had family members who were part of that, um, we were whipped and beaten if we didn't obey. So this is how we raised our kids. And that's how I was raised. And so when I came, um, got older and had a child of my own, and all of this information was given to us at the time and that sort of thing. And I just said, you know what? I'm not going to whip my child. But I had to look back at those whippings that I got, which may have in some way scarred me as a result of the time. So I was able to heal that part of my inner child. And um, when I'll let you know something else. In my lifetime, I've lost approximately 65 to 67 people that were close to me. That's family, friends, and so on. And when my youngest son passed away, and I went into grief counseling, and the loss, it just devastated me. But I was able to go through the counseling, and one of the things that the counselor shared with me was, you're like a toddler who learns to walk, but when you look back, like a toddler looks back at the parent to make sure that they're still there, she says every time you would look back, somebody would be gone. They'd be dead. And this started like at a very young age. Um, I remember one of my first, me and the cousin I spoke about, us peering over into a coffin, wondering what was, we were like 5 and 6 years old, and everybody was going to look, and we were made to go up and look. And we were looking over in the coffin, wondering what we were looking at. Why was she in there? Okay. But the thing is that people disappear from your life for that reason. They pass away. And so I had to look back and reconcile within myself, these people are gone. I lost my closest cousin, not this one, but the other one. She was one of the first people to have a open heart surgery. She was 18 years old. I was 14. And she died. She didn't make it through. And so the consistent thing about people leaving my life as a very young person, my another aunt, That cousin, a friend in elementary school who got shot. I don't even know his real name. We called him Jet. And he died. He got shot and killed. And so I was always seeing people dying. And so when she said that, the counselor said that during the time I had lost my youngest son, I was like, okay, that's why, you know, losing a child, period, is difficult. It's the worst for any parent. And so when you go through that and you're going through that, that's bad enough in itself. But when you have piled on top of that all of the other losses that you've had in your life, then you look up and you've lost a child. And to bring me out of that, that counselor had to dig deep. And so, you know, that helped me through that period. But it also helped me look back at my life and all the losses and how a loss to me is still to this day magnified, be it loss of a job or loss of anything, loss of a place to live, anything that's a loss to me, I respond emotionally. And that's because if you look at my avatar, that child is still crying over all the other losses. It's a matter of my trauma playing out in my adult life. So it's so important that we look back to be productive human beings without any sort of hindrances for our growth, that we look back and say, okay, why am I lacking in this area? What's going on? And you can rest assured that a lot of it is going to go back to something that happened in childhood. Um, Being on the defensive, not taking accountability, or continuously making bad choices. If you're not mentored as a child, for example, you don't know how to make choices. And you're consistently making the same mistakes. That goes back to childhood because it's something you weren't given as a child. When people pass away, all of these things help, contribute to your development as an adult. And you are a product of your environment. When you have um, adults, and I'm older than a lot of people on here, I'm 74. When you have people who raised you, who were raised during the Depression, for example, you're taught basically, don't you throw anything away. Okay, don't you get rid of this. Don't you get rid of that because you might need it. Because they remember when everything crashed during the Depression that things weren't available. When my aunt passed away, it was really funny. I started healing then because I had to go through her stuff and get rid of stuff and everything. And one evening after I had worked all day, and I was sitting with my hand, you know how that when you're thinking, like wonder what's going on. So why in the world does someone need 12 spatulas and 10 hammers? Why does she do that? And I had to look at, you know, her basically being someone who was raised in an era that was required. You had to get a hold of whatever you could and keep it. It's the same thing with trauma. Okay, whatever you've been through, you yourself can relive it simply because it's there for you to relive. That child is still crying out to you. And so I'm doing this series because I feel it's needed. Instead of looking at one another in this particular sector, this algorithm, looking at one another, criticizing, fussing, complaining, going back and forth. A lot of times we're responding to someone based on our own um, lack of healing in a certain area, a need to do something, a need to say something, or a need to do whatever. And that's how that comes into play in your adult life. And I'm talking about your real adult life, not your virtual social media adult life, but your real adult life, because that is the key to your healing. Nurturing and looking at your surroundings and those people in your real world life, how you react to them and how it plays out with your lack of healing. And I can say with some measure of certainty that um, my healing that I've been going through for the past few years um, is indeed a result of that inner child healing. I I think many of you, I don't know if any of you, everybody has seen it, but that video I did about my 2023, that was one of the best years I've had in decades because there was so much happening to me simultaneously, making me go back to that person that I was before the healing. And I'll give you an example. My stepbrother committing suicide, my father having a stroke and dying, my mother having a heart attack, but not dying, but still having the heart attack. Um, During COVID, even people dying around me that I love dearly, friends, family, neighbors. And so I would relapse and revert back to that healing that didn't take, that had taken place, but I revert back to the pre-healing of the losses that goes back to when I was starting at 5 years old. And so I had to continuously reset the healing. And if I have to go back a million times to a little child and say, it's not the same thing, it's okay, you're all right, it's going to be all right. That's what I have learned to do. I've had to dig deep within myself and heal and move forward. And that's what this is about, healing and letting things go that you feel, may feel at some point, oh, this is awful, this is happening. When you reset your mind to healing in the present, you've got to go back and rescue that inner child and let that inner child heal with you because it all goes back to that. One of the things that I do and have done, um, I have a lot of hobbies. I have a lot of entrepreneur type things. I even have a political blog that no one on here knows about. Those are the things. And then reading. I do have a library that's filled with inspirational books like Khalil Gibran, Ralph Waldo Emerson, Maya Angelou, and people who inspire and uplift. Some of you use Audible. I like to read the written word and turn the page because I'm old school. But the words that you hear will promote uplifting yourself and elevating yourself to a level in which you can heal. There is nothing that can happen to you in the present and your reaction to it will not go back to your childhood. And you have to learn to overcome that. And so this is for the people who have been um, neglected as a child or abused as a child, um, mistreated, bullied, whatever, any of those things that as a child, they look very, very big. But as an adult, they shouldn't look as big as they did as it did when you were a child. And so you have to heal that so that you can move forward as a productive adult that's not a child reacting to um, your emotional trauma. And that's a practice that you have to do daily. Another thing to do, other than reading about it, my mother always told me, put on some classical music. Well, I'm listening to the Temptations or whoever was popular at that time. I ain't thinking about no classical music. But as it turns out, she was right. And so I personally have found solo piano music to be soothing and relieving the inner stress. You have to relieve your inner stress every single day. And so if you want to heal, you have to want to from your trauma, then you have to do the things that prevent you from relapsing back into that traumatized child. You have to learn to um, say, okay, what is this about? Why am I feeling this way? That sort of thing. And not be reactionary, but be proactive for your own self wellness and your own mental health. And a lot of us as young adults, like me at the time, losing a child will turn your world upside down. It really will. You become just totally lost in that grief. I know I was. It took me about 10 years to finally go through all the stages of grief. And at this point, I can say, okay, you know, you never get over it. So I hope no one ever tells anyone to get over losing a child. But losing anyone that's close to you, especially as a child, you have to go back and heal that and say, and realize death is a part of life. But what I learned to do over time is freeze in my mind that person's laugh, that smile, that sort of thing. There are some people who as children lost their parents and didn't have parents. And they've had to go back and heal that. That's why you see people who were given up for adoption or put in foster care go look for their parents, their biological parents, because they have that rejection that they feel like, why didn't you want to keep me? Why did you send me away? And for them, just hearing the why of it heals that inner child. There are things that go on in our lives, and everyone is not going to say everything that's happened to them on a public platform, nor am I. But I can honestly say that when you have that happen, imagine what that adult may be going through, feeling some sort of rejection. How are they going to respond then as an adult, respond in a proper way to rejection if they don't heal that part of their life? It's something they'll never understand. Some people are fortunate enough to get into foster care where they experience that love, but they still want to know what happened. That means that they are not completely healed. But when that part of them is healed, that's when they can truly move forward as a productive adult and respond appropriately to circumstances which take them back to that child again. So, in so many ways, what you need to do is look at your childhood, look at your trauma, admit there's trauma there, address it, and then start working on healing those emotions. That avatar When I saw that, and I've got the artist's name in the description, and she's on Facebook, and she really did something with this photo that you're looking at, this representation of what she did. That child is still calling out to you, still needing to be rescued. There's something in you that still needs to be healed. And when you admit that, you will be surprised at the outcome in your real life. You will be pleased at the choices that you make, which will change, and looking forward, who you will become. And I'm speaking to people of all ages. We have to look at ourselves inside and go back and heal. This photograph, this picture, this artist rendering says so much to so many of us. But when you do go back and heal that inner child and attempt to do so, you will have to have the ability to forgive and move forward and really forgive each indication that comes in your mind. So that's the first thing I wanted to talk about as far as healing. This is part one. There will be a part two. And I hope indeed this has helped somebody who's suffering right now, maybe with loss, healing from loss as a child, um, and as an adult can't handle loss as a result of that. I hope that this helps in some way to know that even though the people around you look like everything's okay, everything is not okay in everyone's life. I'll say this: when my youngest son passed away, and my mother was my eyes and ears at the time, because I started looking at people differently. I had more empathy because I was walking around looking normal, but I looked at other people and I said, you don't know what someone else is carrying within them. You don't know what they're dealing with emotionally. And I started looking at people differently at that point, because I can't read people's minds. I don't know what's going on or has gone on in their life, but they didn't know that I had just lost my youngest son. And yet I was walking in a mall, going to get clothes for him for his funeral and so on. But I didn't look like it. I was out among people looking normal. So you don't know what someone else has been through. And so your empathy level went up. It went up for me anyway. And I recognized that that was a part of my growth. And I was a young parent at the time. So, you know, I personally was not doing very good on the healing part at that time. It took time for me to heal that. But that also went back to my childhood of losing so many and no one ever really explaining anything to me. They were just gone. Okay, they just died or they just got shot or whatever happened. And these are things that you have to work on healing. As a parent, I can tell you that when people lose a child, um, like people are criticizing, for example, Bobby Brown because he's gained so much weight and this, that, and the other. I'm giving Bobby Brown a hard pass because he lost the love of his life and his child. So, yeah, those losses are explained through, how he may be looking now, but he's still trying. He's still out there trying to live his life. And I'm sure he's had the counseling that's needed. When you go back into your memory, if there's anything that stands out or something already standing out, Go back and look at the circumstances. And I always tell people they have grief counseling. I don't care when the loss occurred, they have grief counseling. You can go to someone and say, my cousin died 50 years ago and I still can't get over it. Okay? Or you can go to them and say, I was abused and I still can't get over it. Therapy is good because they help you peel that onion layer so you can see what the real problem is. And a lot of times it's that little child responding again and again and again and again. And I hope this has been helpful. And I'm going to do a part 2. And through this, we, because it's not just about somebody else, me too, we can get through it and we can grow. But, they say that your response to something, 90% of what happens to you is your response to it. And the other 20% of is what really happens. You have to get beyond that 90% point and, move forward. And again, look at your inner child saying, have I felt this way before? Why am I feeling this way now? And this is something that I've been wanting to do for some time. And I'm so glad that I'm at a point where I finally got around to it. And I hope that it has helped someone. I don't have any list of therapists or anything like that, but this is a start. And please go to the description and click on that link and do that exercise with them. If you see some point in your childhood that is playing out in your adulthood. The friend that sent it to me was going through that, and it helped her tremendously. She was very, very much on top of that. And she sent me the link and said, look at this. This helped me, because she was going through some memories and that sort of thing. And so I clicked on it, and her not knowing that I had my own healing to do, and it really did help. So click on that in the description box and move forward, but move forward with a healed inner child. Okay, everyone. I hope you're looking forward to part 2. Have a good night.